i.e. 30F, I'm the villain of my parents, 48F and 51M, story, and I'm okay with that. English is not my first language, and this is a long story, so I apologize in advance. My mother, D, got pregnant at 17 while my father, J, was 20. They were not a couple and he had a girlfriend at the time, so when the news was out things got chaotic. From what I was told, J was a womanizer that cheated on his girlfriend multiple times, so he wanted nothing to do with D. She talked to his mother and sisters about the pregnancy and her wanting a relationship with J, but he wasn't the type to listen to people telling him what to do, so he distanced himself of the situation and continued his relationship with his girlfriend. Before getting pregnant, D was already a problem for her parents, now 75F and 82M, BC. She lived by her own rules, was very disrespectful, had an habit of lying, sneaking out of the house to party and dropped out of school at 16. She always had a strange relationship with her brother, 2 years younger, BC. She thought he received a better treatment from their parents. When D was 7 months pregnant, my grandparents decided to move to a bigger city against her wishes. BC. They thought her relationship with J was unhealthy and this way they could help her raise me while she would go back to school. My grandma was the breadwinner and my uncle got a job at 15 to help with the bills, while my grandfather was a stay-at-home granddad and my mom split her time between school and work. That would last a couple years until D became obsessed with another guy, decided to marry him and took me to live with them when I was 2. Her husband, M, 2 years younger than her, worked at his father company and D was a stay-at-home mom. They had a party all the time lifestyle and I was always with them on road trips, parties, pubs, and barbecues with friends. When I was 4, my sister G was born and with a new baby they couldn't party together daily like they did before. That's when M started to go out without D, and when he came back home very drunk they argued a lot, had scream matches, and after some years of this dynamic he eventually started to hit her. D's relationship with M's parents was rocky and they judged her for being a young mom and considered her a gold digger. When she asked for their help, BC, his alcoholism and the domestic violence, they helped, but blamed her and the pressure she put on him of being a breadwinner while being so young. D and M tried to work things out for a while but eventually his addiction won, and they divorced when I was 7. D, me and my sister went to live with my maternal grandparents. One thing I remember about DS and MS marriage was the constant tension in MS parents' house. D and M had me calling him dad since I was 3, so I used to call everyone grandpa, grandma, uncle, auntie, and everyone was polite but not warm. When G was born everyone treated her so well. She was everyone's favorite. She always received kisses, hugs, compliments, and I didn't understand why people didn't treat me the same. D also treated G better. I always had the feeling that D didn't like me. BC, she almost never hugged me or talked to me, ignored me when I tried to show affection and was always cold towards me. And M, he always seemed like he didn't want to be a father or husband, and was always doing stupid things to feel alive, like speeding his car while drunk or sitting at the window with his legs out in our apartment at the 29th floor. A few months after their divorce, D took me to a trip to the mall and as we ate McDonald's she told me M was not my father and that I actually had another dad. She then introduced me to J, who had a quick chat with me, bought me a doll, and then we went home. It was a weird day. A few months passed and I saw him again at a doctor appointment who was in fact a DNA test. He was with his wife, as he was now married to his girlfriend from when he was younger, and they didn't spoke to me and D at all. The test became positive and I officially had JS last name added to my name, and he started to pay child support. I never saw him again after the day we had the test done. Money was tight in our house. BC, my grandma and uncle worked but were paid minimum wage. Grandpa worked as a handyman and carpenter, so it was challenging to feed everyone, pay rent, utilities, clothes, etc. D had child support from J and MS family but would always claim she had no money. M was a wreck and completely out of control, and his family hated to pay child support, so after a few months MS parents offered to raise my little sister as they were wealthy and could provide for her and enroll her in good schools, etc. I remember being so confused. BC, I didn't want to be separated from my sister, and I wanted to live with grandma too, but she was not my grandma. D accepted the offer and started to live by her own rules again. She worked and was barely home when she had free time. After my sister went to live with her grandparents, I became a lonely kid. She would come to our home every other week for the first year, but then her grandparents started to bring her less and less to see us, and D didn't care enough to go see her at their house as well. Sometimes she would send me to spend time at their house and it was always weird. BC, again, people were polite but not warm. I felt so much resentment. BC, my sister lived a better life than mine, with toys, clothes, trips, private school, language classes, etc., while I was in public school and mostly alone in my house watching TV and playing with old or donated toys. We had two completely different lives, but one thing in common was that Dee weren't present in any of them. Ever since her divorce, Dee became colder and more distant. She worked all day and partied all night, from Monday to Monday, and almost always slept at her friend's house to avoid going home and have to listen to her parents lecture her for not taking care of her kids. She had a terrible relationship with her parents, and the three of them would always fight BC of money and responsibilities. When I was 8, I asked her why did she had kids if she didn't like her kids, and Dee told me that she wanted to have an abortion when she was pregnant with me, and Jay rejected her, but her parents didn't consent, and that's why she hated them. My grandparents didn't have the habit of saying I love you, but they showed me love by taking care of me with kindness and respect, and I also learned a lot from my uncle, who loved to spend time with me when he was home from work. I used to pray every night asking God that my grandparents reveal that they're my real parents and Dee was just a mean sister. I remember sometimes not having a proper shoe or clothes to go to school, and my grandma would buy it for me even if she didn't have the extra money. But in her bedroom, Dee had a nice big collection of high heels and high-end party clothes. When I was 9, Dee got together with her second husband, 15 years older than her. He had 2 daughters from his first marriage who were 12 and 14 at the time and lived with their mom. I never confirmed that, but it always seemed like they had some kind of agreement that he would not raise someone else's kid. He used to pretend I didn't exist and ignore me. He wouldn't talk to me or acknowledge me if I was in the same room. When I was 11, my mom became pregnant with my sister Elle and went to live with E. My grandma asked her to take me, but she talked to me in private and asked me to say to my grandparents that I didn't want to go with her. BC, she wanted to start a new family. 1 year and 5 months after Elle was born, Dee gave birth to my brother R. When I was 1 and Elle was 2, E lost his job and the 4 of them went to live with us at my grandparents' house. Dee had to work and I was used as a nanny for the babies. I didn't had a normal life for a 13-year-old and missed birthday parties and school events. BC, I was taking care of 2 babies at home. My sister G rarely came to our house, but when she came, Dee showered her with love, and I resented her so much that I stopped going to her grandparents' house to see her. At the same time I was basically raising my little brother and sister. Dee would berate me for everything. She would yell at me that I was too fat, that I was ugly BC of acne, that my hair was weird, and that everything in me was bad BC I had bad blood. She hated that my grandparents treated me well and liked me. If I asked to go out to study with friends, she would guilt trip me BC the kids needed me and liked to be with me. She would go out with E almost every night and I was the one making the kids dinner, bath and sleep time, as my grandma didn't want to raise 2 more grandkids. E didn't had a new job, but would spend the day out working. Later we discovered he was addicted to gambling and worked as a poker player for his wealthy friends. As the years passed, I became an angry teenager because I felt misunderstood, lonely and used. I started to yell back at Dee when she yelled at me, and our home became a place full of tension. My uncle moved with his girlfriend and her kid, and I hated that me and my grandparents were stuck with Dee and E at our house. I loved my baby brother and sister like they were mine, and at the same time I hated to be put in that situation without a choice. Everyone used to say you need to help your mom with the kids, but all I wanted was a normal teenager life, so I started to dismiss DS requests and do my own thing. At 15 I met F, 2 years older than me. He is now my boyfriend and we live together, and started to go out with friends more, and to have a social life. Dee hated this BC, it meant she had to step up more as a parent to her younger kids. When I was 17 I was seen as difficult and rebel BC, I stopped listening to DS orders and requests. My sister G was 13 at the time and she used to come to our house once every 3 or 4 months. One day I discovered G's Twitter and was full of self-hating and borderline suicide tweets. I remember being shocked, and I messaged her telling her to stop playing with serious matters. BC, killing yourself, it's not a joke. She didn't reply. I didn't follow her on Twitter but kept track of her activity daily, and at some point I became so worried that I sent a few of her tweets to our cousin. It was her cousin from MS side. Her father printed the tweets and showed to their grandparents, and after a few conversations about G's mental health, they decided and informed Dee that G should live with her at my grandma's house. When I learned this I was surprisingly happy and felt so much joy. BC, I would have my sister near me and share a room with her, and I wanted so much to be the one to tell her, so I called her home. M picked up the phone, and when I asked him if I could speak to G he told me no. He told me that she was sad that day, and he was taking care of her. I insisted, but he kept saying no and eventually hung up the phone. The next morning I woke up with DS phone ringing at 7 a.m. and then she ran downstairs to my room and yelled, "Wake up, your sister killed herself." The days following my sister's suicide were something I can't explain. I felt guilty, I felt angry, I wanted to scream to D and M that it was their fault, but I didn't had any words. I was so mad. M tried to apologize to me at her funeral for the call and comfort me, but I couldn't even look at him. Not once D tried to comfort me or say something nice. She was in pain and was feeling guilty as well. G's grandparents felt so bad they didn't even attend the funeral. I dropped out of high school when I still had 6 months to graduate BC. I felt so much pain that I couldn't go back to my normal life. Then I started to feel angry at G, and this anger lasted a few years. 1 year after G's death, I was feeling so lost that I found J's phone number and called him. We met at the same mall from when I was 7, and I explained to him that I was grieving heavily and wanted a relationship with him. BC, the one I had with D was so dysfunctional. He said nice things and made promises, then we went home and never contacted me again. From 18 to 21 I was a wreck. I graduated high school and started college, but dropped out after the first semester. I had a job and spent all my money on alcohol and drugs. I tried all drugs you can imagine and went out to drink every day, but I was still responsible and maintained my job. I was living with my grandparents, while D and E lived with L and R. I helped financially at home and started to have a serious career, but I was still coping badly with my grief and suffering from PTSD. D had a reality check with G's death and became a good mom to L and R, stopped with the party life and had a nice job. When I turned 22, me and F, my good friend from high school, started to date, and at 24 I moved with him and went back to college. We now have a dog, an apartment, good jobs, and a strong relationship. Me and Deet started to have a good relationship as well, with ups and downs, and not like mother and daughter, but more like sisters. I started to say things like I'm proud of D because now she is for Eleanor the mother she never was for me and G. She never liked F much. BC, he knows our history and is very protective of me, so he doesn't like her and makes it very clear. Once my life had some stability, I was able to work on my grief and on forgiving myself and G for her death, but deep down I never really forgave D and M. A couple years ago I started to wonder what happened to J. I was still hurt from our last contact when I was 18, but felt the need to know more about him, so I found him on IG and we started to chat. He asked to meet me for lunch and I agreed, so he came to my city and we met. He was very apologetic, telling me how he regretted his choice of not being a part of my life. He told me he had a daughter who was then 12, now 14, and that he was divorced from his wife but still living with her. He said that she was the main reason he didn't have a relationship with me. BC, she hated D and didn't want him to be a dad to his affair kid. He chose her, and now their marriage was over, and he wanted to start a real father-daughter relationship with me. He told me he owns a car dealership store, has a boat, lives near the beach in a nice house with a pool, and that he resents his ex-wife BC. She never wanted him to enjoy the things he loves, like fishing, traveling, being by the sea, etc. He also admitted he cheated on her a lot in the last 30 years, but claimed to love her even if he didn't know how to be a good husband. After our lunch I met D, as she lived nearby, and we always met to go to the supermarket together. During our car trip I told her about my lunch with J and told the whole story. I even told her about the cars and boats, and about him still being a womanizer like he was before and a shitty husband. When I finished telling her, her exact response was, "It's a shame he chose the wrong woman," and I had a really bad feeling. For the next months things got weird. D and J started following each other on IG and she began to post thirst traps on her stories daily. He is a Christian and she started to also post Bible quotes daily. Then out of nowhere she tells everyone that she found an old friend on IG from when she was a teenager and she was going to a trip to J's town where she used to live when she got pregnant to meet her friend. We went to the mall with my sister L a few days before her trip and D bought new panties and a nightgown. It was all really weird and I started to suspect she was going to meet J. After a few weeks of me thinking I was going insane, the truth came out. J called me to say he was renting an apartment in his town and D was going to live with him. D announced that she was divorcing from E, but never mentioned J. She claimed she was unhappy and wanted to start a new life, so she was going away to her old town to live with her friend. I went nuts. I was blindsided by all this drama and asked them to tell the truth to everyone. D was abandoning E, L and R for my father, and I felt like it was my fault. D begged me to cover for her BC. She didn't want anyone to know about her and J, but I kept pressuring them, so she came clean. My sister was especially mad and very protective of her father, didn't want anything to do with D. My brother was like, I don't understand, but I don't really care, lol. I was extremely disappointed and angry because D was now abandoning L and R like she did with me and G. It's been 2 years since she left. My sister eventually forgave her. E has a new girlfriend, and everything went back to normal, or at least a new normal. But here's the thing, D and J now want me to accept them as my mom and dad and to play pretend family with them. They constantly invite me to spend time with them and at first I did, but it was so bad for my mental health that F made me say no a few times and now I'm completely low contact with them. Now that they are a couple, they visit my maternal family and complain about me. They say I'm heartless, that I should forgive them, that I should spend time with them and travel to their town to be at their house. They say I'm unflexible, I'm stubborn, I'm ungrateful. But I feel it's unfair. When I needed them to be mom and dad, no one wanted to be a family. I had to learn to live without their love, to be strong for myself. I had to live with the consequences of their choices and mistakes, and now that I'm a well-adjusted, successful adult, they want to play family to the world. They want to claim my success as theirs. I just can't. I lived a very traumatic life because of their choices. I felt unloved and uncared for, and now they want me to love and care about them. They claim that I need to be present for them and my sisters, and that I need to understand their choices and that mistakes were made, but they meant no harm. Do you want to know why Jay is divorced from his wife? 1 year before I followed him on IG, another daughter of his did the same. She is 2 years older than me, and another affair kid. His wife didn't know about her. Jay claimed that he knew, but thought she wasn't his, so he never mentioned her or her mother. This girl is JJ, and she desperately wanted a father, to the point she caused Jay's divorce by fighting constantly with his wife and showing up uninvited in their lives. When Jay met JJ, he felt so guilty. He wanted to be the father she needed, so when his wife opposed to this, he simply divorced. Now JJ works with him at his shop and is BFFs with D. She messaged me on IG saying she always wanted a sister, but I just ignored her. I hate that she exists. BC, her experience basically makes mine unacceptable to them. BC, if she forgave Jay and became the perfect daughter, I should do the same. JJ and her husband are always having dinner with J and D, while me and F are distant. In fact, F hates J and D, so he's always making sure I don't overstep my own boundaries just to be a good girl to two people who never cared about me. I'm doing therapy, trying to be a good granddaughter, sister, and girlfriend. But I don't try anymore to be a good daughter. I don't want to be in their lives, and I hate that they chose each other instead of me. I hate that D chose several men and J chose his wife instead of their kids. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them and have a relationship, and honestly I don't know if I want to. I can only give back the love I received, and that's why I chose to protect my mental health instead of theirs. I've sent them both a huge message explaining my feelings, asking them to respect my distance, and saying that if they have the right to be absent for 30 years, then they need to accept if it takes me more 30 years to forgive them. This is my story with my parents, and I think for now I'm fine with being the villain of their story.